Hey everyone, welcome to another painting tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to paint the ice version of the new Tervigon kit from GW. I began by removing all of the appropriate pieces from the sprues. Then with a sharp hobby knife, I carefully removed all the mold lines from the pieces. This is especially important when working with these kits because it really does show in the end if you don't remove them. I primed all of the pieces gray using Vallejo Air Model Gray Primer. Using an airbrush, I base coated all of the parts of the model using Kantor Blue. This color will act as a great foundation color, which we'll get in all the recesses, and later we'll go over it later with lighter colors. As you can see here, there are a lot of parts to this model and a lot of area to cover with the foundation color, making an airbrush ideal. When the base coat was dry, I then base coated all the nails, the spikes, and the Scything Talons using Abaddon Black. I then feathered a dark red on all these areas, first with Wazdacka red, which will act as an intermediate dark red color between the light red and the black. I then went over these areas with a lighter red, primarily Mephiston red. I know it's a little weird using a foundation color, a base color, over a layer color, but I just like the lighter red of Mephiston red. And finally, I went over these with a very light orange, which I created by adding a little bit of Flash Gets Yellow to the Mephiston red. Overall, I really like this transition from a dark red to a relatively dark orange. It creates a nice effect on the nails. I then went over all the other areas on the model with a very thin, watered down, non-oil shade. This wash will get into all the crevices and darken the blue just a little bit and give it a little bit more detail in all the crevices, which we will later dry brush over with more white color. When the wash was dry, I dry brushed all over the body parts with Ghost White paint by Reaper. If you don't have Ghost White, I recommend adding a little bit of Lothern blue to white scars, which will produce, again, a very light color of white with a slight blue tinge. When doing this step, I was quite careful to not go over any of the nail parts that we just painted. As you can see with this first dry brush, it really does allow the details to really now begin to pop on all the arms, the legs, and the body of the model, as well as the head. And then next, I'm going to go over with 2 more dry brushes, each one with a slightly lighter color, as well as a lighter dry brush. The first dry brush, I did a 1-to-1 mix of Ghost White to White Scar. And as I said, I just did a slightly lighter dry brush than the first one, so that you can still see some of the old color in the deeper areas of these parts. And finally, when this dry brush was done, I did one more dry brush. I decided to use the new dry paints from GW, so I used Praxetti White, and as I said, I just did a very, very light dry brush on these areas, only going for the most outer surfaces. And as you see now, it built up a really nice gradient of whites along these areas, and it provides some nice shading already into the arms, the legs, and the body. So it produces a really nice effect overall. Plus, I was just looking for a reason as well to use some of the new dry brush paints from Citadel, as I thought they were really interesting. Next, to protect all the areas that I've painted so far, I used a matte varnish. Specifically, I used a matte one because I want to use a gloss one later on the armor to produce a really nice contrast. Plus, this varnish will protect all these areas from smudging when I'm painting the areas around them later. When the varnish is dried, I painted all of the armor parts with a watered down Caledor sky paint. The goal is to leave a little bit of the shadows along the edges, as you can see, as well as a very thin down paint will actually allow it to pick up all the shading that was done with the wash prior to this step. I then did a couple thin layers of Caledor sky along the areas that should have a little bit more of depth of color to them. So they're usually the areas that are the opposite of the shaded areas. I then started the edge highlighting on all these armor areas, first with Lothern blue by dragging a paintbrush perpendicular along all these armored areas, which you can see here. Next, to make these areas pop even more, I then went over the same areas with the same technique using white scars. This white highlighting will blend really well with the light blue and just make these areas look really, really nice and make them pop in the end. And finally, to protect all these areas, I gave them a gloss varnish to create some nice contrast between the white, which will be a matte, as well, and all the blue areas, which will be nice and shiny, giving the illusion that it's a shell on the Tyranid. And next, focus on the egg sac by building up thin layers of Lothern blue, specifically avoiding the areas in the recesses. I was just building up, as I said, very thin layers, a little bit at a time, to create some contrast in the different areas, some darker than others. I then added a little more contrast by spraying some of the areas with a 1-to-1 mix of Lothern blue to white scar paint. Once again, this just creates some more variation in the colors of the egg sac. And then finally, I added a little bit more highlighting on these areas with just pure white paint, white scars. And here's what it looked like. Then to bring back some of the detail and keep the variation color, I gave it all a watered down Drakenhof Nightshade shading. And this is what the final egg sac looked like. As you can see, there's tons of variation in the color and the details still in there due to the shading. I then repeated the same process on all the spikes on the model, starting with black and then with Wazdacka red to Mephiston red, and then finally a dark orange. This will keep it all the same. And then I did the tongue with Mephiston red. However, to darken the tongue as well as bring back all the detail, I gave it a non-oil shading, which will, as I said, give a really dark color to it and keep all the really nice detail on the tongue. I painted the gun on the Tervigon Lothern blue as well to keep it consistent with the other parts. And then finally, to bring back the detail on the gun part, I gave it a watered down Drakenhof Nightshade. And lastly, I painted the eyes on the Tervigon as well as the Tervigon, the same two red colors. So I began with Wazdacka red. And then I painted small circles in the center of the eyes using Mephiston red, just to give it a little contrast and make the eyes show a little bit better. And that's it. You now know how I painted up my Ice Tervigon model. Overall, I have to say that I think it turned out really nicely. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, and I really like the contrast between the matte white and the shiny blue. And I really like this kit overall. It has a lot of awesome detail, and I really hope to see a lot of these new Tervigons on the tabletop. And that's it. So as always, thank you to all you awesome people out there for watching my videos. You're truly my inspiration. Please like, comment on this video, and subscribe to my channel if you already haven't done so. So till next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.